Tonight on Bridge City News, Premier Jason Kenney and our province's Advanced Education Minister were in Lethbridge today. Some of the Lethbridge federal candidates officially launched their campaigns last night, including the Conservatives' Rachel Harder. And Justin Trudeau was absent from the federal leaders' debate last night. We chat with political reporter Brian Lilly about what that means for the Liberals.
Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge today to speak at the grand opening of the University of Lethbridge's Science Commons. The $280 million building is the U of L's new state-of-the-art science and academic facility. As Loris Alexander explains, our province's Advanced Education Minister was also here touring Lethbridge College.
It all started with a bang. The University of Lethbridge's new science facility, Science Commons, is officially open. Premier Jason Kenney was in attendance for what was known as the Big Bang Grand Opening Weekend.
Very excited to be here. This $260 million contribution by Alberta taxpayers has happened over successive governments, but underscores the confidence that Albertans have in the University of Lethbridge, but also Lethbridge as a vital, dynamic and growing community, the heart of southern Alberta.
Premier Kenney also spoke on the Science Commons dedicated spaces that doubles its capacity for science outreach and the community at large.
It's open for the public, it's open for high school kids and elementary kids to come and learn, to develop a curiosity in the sciences. So I think it's not just about the university, it's about the broader Lethbridge and Alberta communities and economies.
Alberta's Minister of Advanced Education, Dimitrios Nicolaides, was also in town on an 18-school tour, visiting post-secondary institutions across the province.
I've really enjoyed the opportunity and the experience to travel across the province and visit so many of our post-secondary institutions and see just how very unique and different so many of them are, and recognize the different learner needs from across the regions.
This minister has been very deliberate about making sure he sees every post-secondary institution, and his conversations are open and transparent and frank. He's very interested in programming within the colleges and the universities, and certainly having the opportunity to talk with him about the strengths that we have, the kinds of centers of excellence that we are creating, has been really good.
Following Nicolaides' tour of Lethbridge College, he made his way to the University of Lethbridge for the unveiling of Science Commons. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Alberta's Government House Leader Jason Nixon has sent a request to Speaker Nathan Cooper to call all members back to the legislature for October the 8th. Nixon says it's important to bring everyone back in order to fulfill the government's ambitious legislative agenda. In the first 100 days since taking office, the UCP say more than 68 platform commitments have been implemented to help get Albertans back to work. Yesterday, a flag was raised bringing an end to Police Chief Rob Davis's tenure here in Lethbridge. Today, the Police Commission met to discuss a new Chief of Police for our city.
I'm anticipating it's going to be around 3 months, or 3 months at the least. We're about to have our first meeting with the executive search firm that has been hired by the city, and so that's every indication we have is that we're looking at minimum 3 months. We will be looking at setting up an engagement stakeholder survey or process where we will meet with both internal and external stakeholders, including members of the police service, members of the commission, members of the community, perhaps an open house, and just find out what does the community want in the next police chief, and we'll see what he or she, what that might look like.
Lethbridge police are investigating after a 31-year-old man was assaulted on Wednesday night. Police say the incident occurred near Mildred Dobbs Boulevard and Lettuce Perry Road North. The man, who sustained a critical head injury, was first transported to Chinook Hospital, then later taken to Foothills Hospital in Calgary, where he remains. 2 males were arrested from a home along Cougar Cove North, but have since been released with no charges laid. The investigation continues. MP Rachel Harder officially launched her campaign last night. Over 100 supporters were in attendance. Harder spoke about issues surrounding southern Alberta, including the Lethbridge Safe Consumption Site and climate change.
The Liberals determined that supervised consumption sites would be the way to go. I absolutely disagree with their strategy. I think it's incredibly degrading to human beings. Individuals who struggle with a drug addiction deserve the opportunity to detox. They deserve the opportunity to live a life of abstinence. They deserve the opportunity to step in a vibrant future, to pursue education, to pursue a job, to live in consistent housing, to be valued and appreciated by members of their community, but also accepted back into their families, because so many of these individuals are separated from their loved ones because of their addiction. They deserve a vibrant future, and we have the ability to put a strategy in place that is focused on detox, that is focused on helping these individuals restore their lives, and that's the strategy that we'll be putting in place when we form government. The carbon tax is simply a tax on everything. Absolutely everything essential to us as Canadians is being taxed by this so-called carbon levy. At the end of the day, it's doing nothing to further improve our environment. The things that are actually going to improve our environment are investments in green technology, making sure that we're conserving our land and waterways. Water is extremely important. Why are we not having that conversation? We need to protect our water. We need to make sure that we're conserving wildlife. We need to make sure that we're looking after our land. And for crying out loud, let's stop dumping raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River and the Pacific Ocean. Right. Let's take care of our country.
Lethbridge Liberal candidate Amy Bronson also officially launched her campaign last night. Amy stopped by our studio a while ago. We asked her what motivated her to jump into the political ring.
And frankly, the motivation to get involved in politics and the Liberal Party in Southern Alberta is because you care. And I'll tell you what I care about. You know, throughout my experiences, I've seen the role that the federal government really can play. When you have a strong representative championing your region and your riding, really working with the constituency across all of its different unique needs, and Lethbridge is a really interesting, unique region, that really makes a difference. I'm also very passionate and committed to the democratic process in this country, and I believe in the role that campaigns play in having a strong presence across parties in each and every part of this country, Lethbridge in particular, because you get to reach the community, and that's the kind of approach that I'm bringing, and I seek to be the member of Parliament in Lethbridge so I can do that hard work for the community.
Other federal candidates in Lethbridge who have hit the campaign trail include NDP's Shandy Blyken and the Green Party's Stephanie Watson. Last night was the first federal leaders' debate. Absent was Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. One of our political contributors, Brian Lilly, joins me now from Toronto. Brian, Trudeau was in Edmonton rallying supporters. Now, at this stage of the game, wouldn't it have been better for Trudeau to be at the debate?
I would have thought so, and that's what I would have advised the Liberal leader, but he decided not to go. He wanted to be at the rally in Edmonton, and I'll talk about why that was important for the Liberals in a moment. But, you know, a lot of Liberals in their punditry today saying, well, you know, not being there allowed him to see how Andrew Scheer behaves and Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May, and he's got notes, and now he can be ready. I don't buy that for a couple of reasons, Hal. One, Justin Trudeau showed in the last election and since that he can be a good debater. So he's already prepped. He doesn't need the extra time for the October 7th official debate in English. But also, you know, this is something that he should have been there because it allows him to be seen by the most people. It allows him to be seen engaging with the other leaders. But that's what he didn't want. He didn't want to give Andrew Scheer that stage. So he had a stage all to himself in Edmonton.
In your opinion, who was the clear winner last night?
That Andrew Scheer looked like the most prime ministerial, and the other two looked like they were auditioning to be president of the Campus Socialist Club. They were, you know, promising whatever you wanted: free pharmacare, free dental care, free eye care, free tuition. They may as well have said, "You'll get a pony if you vote for us." They're not going to win. They know that, so they can promise everything. They just didn't seem credible. Now, Jagmeet Singh outperformed expectations, I think. Elizabeth May had some bright moments. But in terms of sitting there and saying, okay, could any one of these be prime minister instead of Justin Trudeau? The only one of the three that fit that bill last night was Andrew Scheer.
Ottawa shut down the RCMP investigation into the SNC-Lavalin scandal. Will this help the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, the Trudeau Liberals are hoping it will because a couple of reasons. One, they were asking questions of Jody Wilson-Raybould. We know that last Tuesday, they sat down with her in Vancouver and had an interview with her. We know that they asked for an expansion of the waiver of cabinet confidences on both speaking to witnesses and obtaining documents. They wanted more information than the ethics commissioner got. They were told no. That's been confirmed by the Justice Department and by the Prime Minister's office before the election was called. But since the election was called, the RCMP has put any investigation on hold because of a policy that came in after the 2005-2006 election that said they won't do investigations of a sensitive nature like this during a campaign period. Now, there's a lot of back and forth about whether it's an investigation. I say it is. Others say, well, they haven't officially said it's an investigation. As many police officers have emailed me to tell me, you often don't know there's an investigation going on into you until you're facing charges.
One of our political contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me from Toronto. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
The federal leaders are hitting the campaign trail, bringing messages of tax cuts, supporting families, and health care.
We just had a very enjoyable event here, spending some time with some kids here, highlighting another measure that the Conservative Party is putting forward to help make life more affordable by making EI, maternity, and parental benefits tax-free.
So today, we're announcing that a new Liberal government will expand the incentive to give even more help to people living in Victoria, the Greater Vancouver area, and the Greater Toronto area. In those markets, we will increase the value of a qualifying home from approximately $500,000 to nearly $800,000.
The neglect of health care is wrong. So what I'm here to do today is to commit to the following. We commit to building a new hospital in Brampton. We will support the funding for this new hospital. We also commit to supporting the expansion of Peel Memorial, and we commit to this, to ensuring that by 2020 we have pharmacare for all, so that everyone in our country has access to the medication they need. If you need medicine in our country, you should use your health card, not your credit card.
An employee with the RCMP has been arrested and charged under the Security of Information Act. It is a national security law that looks at security concerns, including threats of espionage by foreign powers. Cameron Ordis was expected to answer to the charges earlier today in an Ottawa courtroom. The charges are anti-spy related. Ordis was a civilian cybersecurity employee in the RCMP. The charges implies he's accused of either hacking or stealing sensitive information through networks and passing it along. South of the border, the Democratic debate was held late last night. Some of the Democratic candidates discussed topics including gun violence in the United States.
We had a nation that in the 1980s said that we are no longer going to have machine guns. We don't have machine guns anymore. We did it successfully. If you look around at other countries that realize that these assault weapons are weapons of war that belong in the theater of war, they found constructive ways to get them off of our streets. Let's stop the fear-mongering. Let's make sure that we are a nation that does not allow weapons of war into our communities. Certainly, the way we're seeing right now, where they're being used in mass shootings with agonizing regularity.
Closer to home, Cooley Fest is officially here. Lethbridge College will be hosting a petting zoo, bouncy castle, 17 food trucks, and a vintage market. The annual event is open for students, but for organizers, they say it's really for everyone.
And it really truly is the whole community. So everyone from little kids to grandparents to community members, stakeholders, but most importantly our students as well. We want to make sure that our students are onboarded to Lethbridge College appropriately, and our new staff and faculty too. Obviously, we are looking to invite our alumni back. I think a lot of those young families and their parents are potentially alumni, but also we're always looking that, there's great education opportunities right in Lethbridge, and we're excited to be part of that community.
The events will officially begin tomorrow. Close to 3,500 people attended Cooley Fest last year. The biggest strike to hit Paris public transport in more than 10 years disrupted travelers' plans today. It also forced commuters to work from home or find alternative ways to reach their destinations.
Services on RATP's transport network are severely affected due to strike action. Passengers are advised to postpone their travel plans. For updated information, ask our staff, check our website, ratp.
Most Canadian NHL teams began their training camps with medicals and physical testing, including the Calgary Flames. Flames' new addition, Milan Lucic, says he has a lot to prove this season.
Even if I had a good year last year, you always have something to prove and want to get better. After having a subpar last year and a half, ever since I would say Christmas of 2017, things, I've been in a slump and that I haven't been able to get out of. So I think I got a lot to prove, and sometimes a fresh start is what gets guys going again, and coming to a team that obviously established itself as a good team last year, I guess helps energize you and helps motivate you to come prove yourself to your teammates, to your coaches, and especially the fans. So lots to prove from my part.
Good luck going out to the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. World War II veteran Lawrence Brooks just celebrated his 110th birthday, and it took place at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans.
Happy birthday from the victory bells. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Thank you.
We've existed to share the stories of the brave men and women of the World War II generation, and I think it's fitting that the oldest American World War II veteran still living is right here in New Orleans, home of America's National World War II Museum.
I made it. I'm glad to be here. There's so many things happen. Some of them I remember, and some of them I don't. Some of them I want to remember, and some of them I don't want to remember.
Wow, 110 years of age. Fighting in the Second World War and surviving, that's truly remarkable. So what does it mean to be brave? Tracy Mitchell is author of the book, Becoming Brave. She says getting to that point takes small, purposeful steps.
And so what do you do when the cards are stacked against you, when life is not dealing the best hand? And then we just choose incrementally. Today I'm going to get out of that bed of depression, or today I'm going to think in a different way than what I thought yesterday. And so we line out in Becoming Brave how baby steps towards becoming brave, baby steps to becoming courageous, reprogramming their mind, rethinking. It just starts with that tiny, small step in the right direction.
Watch the full interview with Tracy discussing what it takes to become brave. That's coming up after business news. Now, do you want to treat yourself and your family this weekend? There are some great movies playing at the Mill once again. With more, here's another Movie Mill Minute.
Toy Story 4. Woody, Buzz Lightyear, and the rest of the gang embark on a road trip with Bonnie and a new toy named Forky. The adventurous journey turns into an unexpected reunion as Woody's slight detour leads him to his long-lost friend, Bo Peep. As Woody and Bo discuss the old days, they soon start to realize that they're worlds apart when it comes to what they want from life as a toy.
Kids lose their toys every day.
I was made to help a child. I don't remember it being this hard.
Woody, somebody's whispering in your ear. Everything's gonna be okay.
Aladdin. Aladdin is a poor street urchin who meets Princess Jasmine, the beautiful daughter of the King of Agrabah. Aladdin stumbles upon a magic oil lamp that unleashes a powerful, wise-cracking genie. As Aladdin and the genie become friends, they must soon embark on a dangerous mission to stop the evil sorcerer Jafar from overthrowing Jasmine's kingdom.
You look like a prince on the outside, but I didn't change anything on the inside. Showtime.
No, I'm in charge, okay? I say when it's time.
Really?
I just might go and see Toy Story 4 tonight. Another beautiful day across southwestern Alberta today. The nice weather will be sticking around. All of the weather details are coming up. We had sun mixed with cloud today, but mild. Tonight, just a few clouds developing with a low near 11. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high near 21. Even warmer on Sunday with a high expected near 27. Monday, just 1 degree cooler. A low pressure system returns on Tuesday with lots of clouds and a high of only 19. Overcast and 18 degrees for Wednesday. Pretty much the same picture on Thursday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 20 degrees with an average low of 5. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1996 at 31 degrees, and the record low was -5 in 1970. Sunrise was at 7:04, sunset at 7:51. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across our home and native land. Victoria will have periods of rain and a high of 18, showers and 18 as well for Vancouver. A mixture of sun and cloud and 20 degrees for Calgary on Saturday. Mainly cloudy and 21 degrees for Edmonton. Just a few clouds and 22 is on tap for Regina. Expect 1 degree cooler under mainly sunny sky in Saskatoon. Lots of sunshine and 21 degrees in Winnipeg tomorrow. Mainly cloudy and 22 for Toronto. Showers and 22 for Ottawa. Rain or drizzle and 23 degrees for Montreal on Saturday. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have rain and 17. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly cloudy and 18. Charlottetown, PEI will be partly cloudy and 17. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect lots of sunshine and a high near 16 degrees tomorrow. Ford is recalling more than 325,000 of its 2017 Ford Explorer vehicles across North America because of a sharp seat frame edge. The automaker says so far there have been 31 reports of hand injuries due to the defect. Ford says users could come in contact with the sharp edges when reaching between the power front seat and center console. Around 23,400 vehicles are being recalled in Canada, along with close to 312,000 in the United States. Just over 3,000 are also being recalled in Mexico. Stats Canada says the household debt-to-income ratio improved slightly in the second quarter. The agency says the ratio edged down to a seasonally adjusted 177.1% from 177.5% in the first quarter. Credit card debt and mortgages increased to $23.5 billion from $18.9 billion in the previous quarter. Stats Canada says it was the third consecutive quarterly decline since the third quarter of last year when the ratio stood at 178.3%. Close to 75% of realtors across Canada want federal parties to commit to easing mortgage rules. They say too much regulation makes homeownership unaffordable. Real estate boards want the parties to revise the mortgage stress test and adapt it to regional differences. They're calling for the reintroduction of 30-year amortizations and a $2,500 refundable credit for first-time homebuyers. The CEO of the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation wants the current rules to stay to protect the economy. Ontario Premier Doug Ford got an earful from Ontario farmers. Ford met with producers on the first day of Canada's Outdoor Farm Show near Woodstock. Producers told Ford they need help dealing with labor shortages and compensation for trade disruptions. Ford says their input gives him proper perspective on the challenges facing agriculture. He says his government is committed to working with the industry to protect Ontario workers during trade disruptions. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge today to speak at the grand opening of the University of Lethbridge's Science Commons. The $280 million building is the U of L's new state-of-the-art science and academic facility. Our province's advanced education minister was also here touring Lethbridge College. So how well do millennials connect with Gen Xers and baby boomers? Sociology professor Dr. Joel Thiessen recently wrote a book entitled Millennial Mosaic, and he gives us his thoughts next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. LCI band students will be doing a car wash and bottle drive fundraiser on September 14th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Gas King on 16th Avenue North to help support the LCI band program. These dedicated students will vacuum, wash, and dry your vehicle with a smile. Cost is by donation. They'll also be accepting empty bottles for their bottle drive. The 30th Annual Giant Pumpkin Festival and Auction in support of the Children's Wish Foundation is taking place Saturday, September 28th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Green Haven Garden Center. Come out and enjoy face painting, wagon rides, a petting zoo, plus a live and silent auction, and much more. All proceeds benefit the Children's Wish Foundation in Southern Alberta. The Lethbridge Public Library is proud to join communities across the country in a national celebration of literacy, storytelling, and the literary arts by bringing the Word on the Street Festival on September 21st, beginning at 11 a.m. at the Lethbridge Public Library main branch. Enjoy free workshops and demonstrations, street performers, live music, and much more. For more information, visit thewordonthestreet.ca/Lethbridge. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
So how is the Canadian millennial generation doing? Some people say they can be obsessed with selfies, technology, and not a lot of interest in spiritual issues. Joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Joel Thiessen, Professor of Sociology at Ambrose University in Calgary and co-author of The Millennial Mosaic with Moneta Bailey and Lethbridge's own Reg Bibby. Dr. Thiessen, welcome to BCN.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Can you give me a brief snapshot on what the book really touches on?
Yeah. Who are millennials? How do they view the world? What are their beliefs and practices? And how are they similar or different from young people of previous generations? That's what we tackle in this book.
So how did you go about doing some of the research on this?
Yeah, well, we lean on Reg Bibby's research down to, back to the early 80s, who's been tracking young people. And so this book captures work of his with a nationally representative survey sample in 2015 and 2016 to give us an up-to-date read on Canada's young people compared to young people in previous generations.
Now, one of your findings is quite interesting in that millennials are attending church services more often than their older counterparts, like myself, a Gen Xer, or some of the baby boomers. Did that really surprise you?
It did surprise us. We didn't expect it from some of the other literature and research. And when you dig down, you find out that much of this is driven by immigration and young immigrants who are highly devout, highly religious, in a variety of religious contexts that is driving some of that figure up. So did not expect it, and yeah, was a surprise.
Now, on the other hand, though millennials attend church more frequently, you say they may pray less than other groups. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, in part you find among their parents or grandparents who will pray more regularly because it's a more customized, socialized narrative that they've embraced growing up. Whereas while young people might attend more often, those who do, there's also a growth of those who don't identify with any religion. And in part, that plays itself out with fewer who are praying relative to their parents or grandparents.
Now, apparently 1 in 3 millennials have little use for organized religion whatsoever. What is it about religion that is a real turnoff for millennials?
Yeah, 2 key things stand out to us. One is that fewer young people today are actually raised within a religious tradition. So it's not that they're leaving a religion, they just aren't raised or exposed whatsoever. So that's driving some of those numbers. And then, as you note, some are leaving religion. It's scandals and hypocrisies that they see within religious groups. They grow disinterested, they get involved in other things. Science, evidence versus faith, these kinds of things have become problematic. So there's different reasons and explanations for why some leave, but it's not the only reason for the growth of those who say they're not interested in organized religion.
Now, Dr. Thiessen, you also asked millennials to respond to a couple of statements. One is, I prefer to live life without church or congregation, to which 47% agreed. And the other was, I'd be open to greater involvement if I found it to be worthwhile, to which 42% agreed. So what were some of the things that they would view as being worthwhile?
Yeah, we don't ask directly or talk about it in this book so much on that question, but in some of our other research we do, and we capture ideas of, if I was loved and cared for in a community, then I'd be more likely to attend. If the ministries of a local church were actually engaging the needs of my family. If I could find a place where the preaching was relevant and the music was strong and engaging, these kinds of things. And yet at the same time, we do engage a bit of a debate of, while they might say on a survey they would entertain greater involvement, this doesn't necessarily mean that they will pursue greater involvement. And so we unpack how likely or unlikely it is that young people will in fact pursue greater involvement down the road. And you just don't know until you see as they become older and see what happens there.
In your research, what have you found were some of the biggest differences between millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers?
They certainly stand out among millennials in terms of how open and tolerant and diverse they claim or seem to be on a range of issues, whether it's sexuality, gender, the environment, immigration, things where people are different than themselves. They seem to be far more open, tolerant, and accepting towards people who are different. And this is part of that pluralistic social context that they've been raised within that is quite different than how their parents or grandparents would have been raised. And technology certainly factors into that. Having a broader awareness of different perspectives and viewpoints around the world would be one of the key differences we noted.
Do you think maybe some of the older generation has more of a narrow focus as well, as opposed to millennials?
It certainly could be that. And as sociologists, we don't attach a normative assessment of whether that's a good or bad thing. But certainly there is a narrower lens for viewing the world because this, in fact, is the way in which they were raised by their own parents, by the education system, the political structure. And millennials today, frankly, just have a very different social world that they've been raised within to embrace people who are different than themselves and to have a broader orientation towards different groups in that way.
Now, some of your research found that pervasive individualism is a common trait of millennials. Does this mean they really prefer to focus more on themselves?
Not necessarily. In fact, we might even argue that parents and grandparents are also highly individualistic in some ways. It has more to do with the ways in which that individualism plays itself out. So, for example, when you're picking a school or a potential marital partner and so forth, individualism means that you rely upon your own preferences for making those decisions rather than deferring to other authorities, what your parents might think, what your religious organization might tell you. And in this way, millennials tend to be highly individualistic in how they make those choices and how they make the decisions, that I am the ultimate authority and autonomy over those decisions.
To what degree has technology, the internet, and even social media influenced millennials in making choices on religious and spiritual options?
Yeah, this is an understudied area within the field, and our own data suggests that fewer than 10% of millennials are going online to, say, watch religious services or to perform various spiritual practices. So it doesn't seem to be particularly pervasive, and yet we do anticipate as we move forward that you'll find different ways in which young people are interacting with technology and social media that would broaden their perspective. And I would say this is a major area of research to give more attention to, certainly engaging more than their parents or grandparents, but it's not the lead influencer over how they're making their religious or spiritual decisions thus far.
It's interesting to note that the perception of who God is has changed over the generations. When asked the question, does God or higher power care about you personally, only 53% of millennials agreed, compared to 59% of Gen Xers like myself and 63% of baby boomers like my mother.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting finding because our beliefs and practices are informed by the social context that we find ourselves in. And part of the lower rates that we find here is that some millennials are raised in non-religious homes for all intents and purposes. So they aren't growing up to adopt a particular view towards God or the supernatural that we might find among baby boomers and Gen Xers who are more inclined to view God in the ways that you've just described.
Now, there were some other interesting findings as well, Dr. Thiessen. More millennials believe in life after death and more believe in the existence of hell than Gen Xers and boomers. Any idea why that is?
Yeah, this is definitely a curious one. It stood out to us as we were going through the data. A couple things come to mind. One, the frequency of discussion in pop culture and media, in movies and music and social media that's giving attention to life after death and to hell, that those social influences shape what young people are thinking and ultimately believing there. I would say a second thing that factors in that earlier point I made about immigration and its impact on religion, that we know among young immigrants who are religious, they tend to be far more devout, more conservative in their religious beliefs and practices, and beliefs about life after death and the existence of hell certainly fall in line with more conservative religious orientations on those belief systems.
Yeah, let's talk about different millennials from different cultures. Let's say a Canadian millennial versus maybe someone from the States or someone from Europe or Africa or even Asia. What were some of the big differences and maybe some of the commonalities that you found?
Yeah, there are many commonalities, some of the things that we've spoken of already, but some of the differences do arise based on the experiences of distinct racial groups, for example, in Canada. So we're looking at Indigenous groups, for example, looking at those from Latin America, from Africa, and Southeast Asia, that there are different perspectives and experiences in education systems, in the economic system, in religious contexts, in political settings. And throughout the book, we chart the different ways how those different ethnic groups are making sense of their experiences. And for some of those groups, they are most certainly in marginalized positions and less so for other racialized groups. So it's hard to give an overarching, broad, sweeping response because there are variations based on different racial groups, but differences are certainly there.
Now, you found that millennials do value characteristics like honesty and politeness and concern for others, but I want to flesh this out. You mentioned a little bit on this earlier here. They're more inclined than other generations to accept every kind of social, demographic, and lifestyle variation, and you also believe that pluralism, which you touched on earlier, is a big part of their DNA. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, you think about the education system, what students are taught in the schools about increasingly embracing people who are different than ourselves. And this goes back to our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You think about the political structures, how laws have changed across the country in the last 5 to 10 years relative to different historically marginalized groups. Religious groups and organizations are talking about these things. Social media, you see it all over the place. Families are passing these things on. So all of these things that come together create a social environment that millennials take these things for granted. They can't believe how and why someone wouldn't accept someone who's different than themselves on a number of different social and demographic variables.
It's interesting to see that even though millennials have concerns about the future, they're not really despairing. Rather, they have high hopes and expectations when it comes to careers, income, and family.
Yeah, this is a common thing of this stage of life. In fact, one of the things we do in the book is we track young people in previous generations, and then we track the same people as they age into their 40s and 50s and see how they turn out. And you find that young people across time have been very optimistic at this stage of life, perhaps overly optimistic in terms of what will actually happen later on in their life. But it doesn't seem, despite some of the things we see in the media and popular discourse, that young people are very optimistic, despite the challenges they confront, and we explore those, optimistic about their chances in life and school and work and buying a house and these kinds of things later on in life.
I joke with my son many times. I refer to him as an old soul, even though he's only 23 years of age. So it seems like he may connect more with his grandparents, you know, the boomers, than with the Generation Xers. And you're studying your research. What kind of commonalities have you found between millennials? Do they actually connect maybe better with their grandparents? Maybe the baby boomers?
Yeah, great question. We don't look specifically about whether they connect across each of those generations. We look with mother and father and extent of their ties there. But we would say there actually are far more things in common than not in common between millennials and older generations. That many of their hopes and dreams in life, some of the fears and concerns they have in the world, that millennials are not as distinct as many might assume them to be. And that actually might be one of the greatest takeaways from the book, that people are people, and the social environment that we grew up in creates a set of contexts and conditions for how we see ourselves and other people. And while we see differences, and we've talked about some of those already, there are far more things in common across those different generations.
Dr. Thiessen, any final thoughts on your research on the millennial generation that you'd like to leave with our viewers?
The one thing I would say that stands out to us is that young people are given many choices around what school I'm going to pick, what career, what person I'm going to marry, and so forth, but very little direction on how to make wise choices. And it can be overwhelming for a millennial to say, I have these 50 choices before me and I don't know what choice to make. And so one of the takeaways we talk about near the end of the book is, what does it look like for parents and teachers and adult influencers to help guide young people in making good decisions, to not just say, here's the choices, make a decision, but how do we help you in that process of making the decision? And we think there's a great opportunity for interaction between millennials and parents and grandparents in and around that theme and topic.
Dr. Joel Thiessen, co-author of The Millennial Mosaic. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Calgary.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Life is full of challenges, and it seems that we're busier than ever. There are a lot of pressures and trials that we go through each and every day. Today's guest knows all about it. Tracy Mitchell, a conference speaker, host of the television program Life from DFW, and author of Becoming Brave, How to Think Big, Dream Wildly, and Live Fear-Free. Tracy, welcome to Bridge City News.
Oh, thank you so much for hosting me.
Now, Tracy, tell me a bit more about your book, Becoming Brave.
Yeah, Brave was a challenge, actually. I undertook the writing project for Becoming Brave and never realized how brave that I was actually going to have to be. Shortly after I contracted to write the book, I went through a series of 5 crises in 28 days. And so Brave is not written from a theological or expository point of view, but I wrote Brave during one of the darkest seasons of my life. And so I love that tagline, how to think big, dream wildly, and live fear-free. Most people think that if they have to live a totally fear-free life, in order to have audacious dreams and to live big and to live out those just audacious dreams. And it's so not true. We just begin by small steps, baby steps, one day at a time, in order to live that victorious life.
Well, you talk about thinking big. I mean, you're in Texas, Dallas, Texas. Texas is all about thinking big, isn't it?
It's a country of its own.
Now, one of the statements on your website is that a victorious life is not stumbled upon, it is cultivated. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, becoming brave is most women or men don't wake up one day and decide, hey, today I want to be brave. But it's people who are pushed in positions that they have no choice to become brave. And so what do you do when the cards are stacked against you, when life is not dealing the best hand? And then we just choose incrementally. Today I'm going to get out of that bed of depression, or today I'm going to think in a different way than what I thought yesterday. And so we line out in becoming brave, how baby steps towards becoming brave, baby steps to becoming courageous, reprogramming their mind, rethinking. It just starts with that tiny, small step in the right direction.
Now, you say when we run into the trials of life, it often really reveals who we are. Is that a good thing?
Sometimes. The matter of the fact is that it's revealing, and what we do with the knowledge that we gain during those dark seasons determines what becomes of our life. You know, we fall into that pit of discouragement and stay there, or we find a way to climb out and to do things that we never even imagined were possible.
I think we all battle with fear and insecurity to varying degrees. Can you share some of your own personal struggles in this area? Also, maybe offer some advice to help others to rise above?
Absolutely. My life didn't begin as a fairy tale at all. And in my first book, Downside Up, Embracing Rejection as Life's Golden Opportunity, I share that my personal insecurity, my struggle was feeling that my life had no merit or no worth. And so I unpacked that thought. How do we turn something as severe as betrayal or rejection to our advantage? How do we flip the cards on that? And so I lined out the top 10 reasons of how to embrace rejection as a golden opportunity in life. Because the truth is, we can't avoid rejection, we can't hide from it, we can't intellectualize beyond it. So what do when we face things like rejection or things like betrayal? Is we have to have a game plan in place before, and then begin to act and see that it's our best friend and personal conductor through life.
Now, becoming a brave person does not necessarily mean that fear will not be present in our lives, correct?
Absolutely. No, it's not if fear won't be there, but what do we do with it? When we discover things like I had a fear of public speaking, and now I make my living. My calling is to speak before millions at a time and to travel the world. But when I look back at my life, that's the very thing that the enemy of my soul didn't want me to do. Wanted me to feel so inferior, so beat down, so insecure that I would never open my mouth. And so again, we have to face those fears, not only face them, but learn to conquer them, rise above them, and find a way to work those things to our advantage.
Now, many of us live in a pressure cooker. We try to live up to the expectations of those around us, including a lot of friends and family. Culture can define our role in life. So any thoughts on how to really deal with this?
Yeah, I don't let culture define, and I teach women in particular how if we were dependent on culture to shift and to develop who we're becoming, then that would change with every decade because culture has a different viewpoint based on the decade that we're living in, based on the country that we're living in. You know, I was just in Cuba a matter of months ago, and I spoke before leaders of that nation for 7 days. And one of the primary things that I did was speak to that very thought and create that shift in their minds. How do we awake from what society is telling us that we can or can't do, or what we should or should not become?
Now, we all long to measure up, to be affirmed, to be loved and valued. What do you say to someone who does not have that support and those people around him or her to do that?
You know, I would look carefully. Sometimes the most unsuspecting places are people you will find that sense of worth or validation. In particular, if you're a believer, I pray. I ask God to uncover those who would have a word for my life, who could affirm and reaffirm and bring wisdom to my life. And so through prayer, number one, discovering who they are, being attentive, being aware, and not focusing on the negative people of opinion around you. If our life gets caught up in what the negativity, what people say around us, we will never discover those who actually have a positive voice.
You know, I've had to do that myself, cut some of the toxic and negative people out of my life, and it's hard, especially if you've known these people for 10 or 15 years, but if they constantly bring you down, that's hard. You need to have more support today. Now, you write about the feminist movement that can at times make women, instead of brave, more brash and angry. Can you give me some examples of that?
Absolutely. In our culture, they have sold us the lie, culture has, that in order to be brave, you have to come off as brash. And I found that that's the total reverse of what scripture reveals to us, that women can be meek, they can be comforting and confrontational all at the same time. We don't have to be weak. We weren't wired weak, but we don't have to be abrasive and brash in our opinions. And so how do we do that? How do we find that delicate balance? And again, becoming brave unearths that. It shows strong women who are strong in their faith, but they have wisdom that's applied to the bravery that they've discovered.
Do you think sometimes people have a tough time, Tracy, agreeing to disagree?
Absolutely. You know, it takes moxie and a lot of wisdom. The Bible says that a soft answer, what turns away wrath. And so having the wisdom to know what to say in the moment. I'm friends with a ton of people on my Twitter feed that I have absolutely no points of commonality with them at all, not not political, not religion, and agreeing to disagree for the greater good. I like voices of different schools of thought, of different paths, because something in their journey, they know something based on their journey that I've yet to discover. So we live in a culture where we will bump heads, we will bump theologically, in just our day-to-day interactions. So learning how to do that in a Christian-like manner. You know, how do we do that? How do we hold our own, but yet be kind and be wise in our interaction?
A lot of people today struggle with shame. So what advice do you have for women who wrestle with that emotion?
Yeah, we're living in a season where we can't wrap ourselves in sheets of shame. My mind immediately goes back to the very assignment against the first woman was to lock her in so much shame that she never birthed anything again. And I think that's so powerful is that we have to understand that shame doesn't limit what God can or cannot do with us. It doesn't limit what culture can or cannot do with us. I love that picture. Most people leave Eve alone in the garden with her head hung in shame because she took the full brunt, the blame for all of fallen humanity. And for the life of me, I can't imagine what that level of shame must have felt like. But God looked at her in that garden in her sheets of shame, and he told her, he said, yes, while you are shame filled, he said, I promise you that the seed of all of hope, of all of humanity will come through your womb. And today, God's the same way. He measures the same level of grace to every woman, to every man who may find themselves wrapped in sheets of shame. He wants to unwrap you, to cloak you in grace, and to let you know that your shame does not discredit you from the future that he has for you.
Now, your book touches on pursuing our dreams. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of those dreams. What kinds of things are dream killers?
I think betrayal is the number one dream killer of all. If you've ever been through any form of betrayal, especially through someone that you've been in close relationship with, the enemy seeks through close relationships, again, to disconnect us from our dreams from betrayal. Number one tactic of the adversary, whether we betrayed ourselves or someone else betrays us. And we have to learn, again, how do we handle the difficult things like betrayal? Will that help us eradicate all of our dreams? Or will we use, like Jesus, he used betrayal as a catalyst to help him fulfill his assignment in the earth?
Is the fear of failure often a dream killer as well?
It is, you know, if you don't have a slight bit of natural fear, not God-given fear, but just natural fear, I'm not so sure that what you're doing is actually part of the plan that God has for your life. And so it's learning again how to shape fear. It's not that fear is a sin in itself, but what do we do with fear? How do we cultivate it? Do we let it capsize what we're doing, or do we cultivate that thing to be a stepping stone for our future?
Should people be more intentional about achieving their dreams? Maybe take a piece of paper and actually physically write down a plan and maybe get an accountability partner at the same time?
I think that's huge. Someone challenged me years ago. They asked me what I needed for the next season of my dream. And I said, oh, just pray for me. Just think of me. And they turned around and walked away and said, okay, we'll do that. And then the next year, I got me a dream book. I did exactly what you said. I had me a dream book, and I had outlined in that every way that the next time someone said, hey, how can I help? How can I be a partner? How can I join in with what you're doing? Is I had an entry level for everyone who wanted to help. And all of a sudden, I saw by handing them that dream book that I had more partners than I could count, more people who were on board with what we were doing than I could ever imagine, simply because I had a plan of action.
Now, you believe that God has biologically wired women as networkers and communicators. Why do you think that is?
If you go back and you look I like to go back to the Bible and to see what God said about someone first. And so when you trace back the Hebrew word, the word is Ezer, E-Z-E-R, of what he named womankind. And that word has been translated to be helper, but it's really a four-part word, meaning brave, strong, courageous, redeemer, and savior. And so by tracing the roots back, and the only other time that God used that Hebrew word was when he called himself the same word 14 times in Scripture. So when we look at that, God said about women, he said, you're brave, you're a form of a savior, you're a redeemer, and you're hope to humanity. And if God says that about ourselves, then why should we settle for any lesser labeling of what society may call us?
Now, Tracy, reality is each of us will have some storms in life, and you say we need to learn how to embrace those storms?
Yeah, I was sailing. I love the water not long ago, and I was taking a non-power boat sail, so a wind sail. And I was taking a class, and the storm waves began to capsize our little boat. And I leaned over and I asked the sailor, I said, what do we do in a situation like this? And I'll never forget it. He said, Tracy, if you'll just learn to lean into the storm, he said, the storm will take you beyond what you're in right now. And I thought about that. You know what? If we would just learn to lean in, there are some storms we can't outrun, some storms we can't evade, some storms we can't hide from. But if we can learn to lean into the storm will eventually pass.
How much more of a challenge do you think it is for people who don't know Christ, don't know how to have that relationship with God, to navigate through those storms in life?
I think it's very hard. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's very difficult, because the one thing that is the anchor in our world, and the anchor in the middle of those storms, is our identity and who we're created to be. And in all cultures right now, we see such a shift, such a loss with core identity, gender confusion, all kind of confusion that are core rooted in our identity. And so rediscovering those, working those to our advantage, and finding those things out.
What advice would you give for husbands to be able to support their wives who are going through storms in their lives right now?
Yeah, lean in and listen. Lean in and slowly listen. Women will tell you what you need to know. They don't want men who are necessarily problem solvers. They want a good listener. Women can usually work out their issues by simply talking and communicating, because that's how we're wired. And it's not that we want to talk for men to solve our problems. We want men to have an affinity with what we're actually saying.
And you know what's interesting, as a man myself, I've talked to other husbands and say, we want to help. We want to be able to solve those problems. And my wife says, I don't want it solved. Like you said, I just want you to listen.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Tracy Mitchell, author of Becoming Brave. Appreciate your time and joining us today from Dallas, Texas.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Have a great night.